Evening and welcome. If there's one common denominator running through the guests I have on my programme tonight, it is excellence. The people on my programme are the best in the business, whatever that business might be. If you talk about actresses, then I've got someone who's not only got an Academy Award, but the general acclaim of the critics to prove her excellence, Maggie Smith. Also, there's Kenneth Williams, and what is there left to say about that extraordinary talent? But first of all, I'm going to talk to someone who was at the top of the tree, regarded as one of the greatest footballers there's ever been, until recently, when he ought to be cashing in on his genius, he gave it all up. Once he was the golden boy of British sport. Lately, he's been described in far less complimentary terms. He gave up a gilt-edged career that could have made him a millionaire, and for what reason? Well, here to answer that question, George Best. Welcome back.
Thank you.
You got back, in fact, what, this week sometime, and from Acapulco.
Oh, I can't remember when we got back, and I can't even remember when we left. We've been all over the world.
Yeah. Are you really not ever going to play football again, George?
No, people keep asking me and saying, well, you must come back, and you're going to come back. But I made a decision almost a year ago, and I changed my mind then, but this time I won't.
You won't? What makes you so certain?
I don't know. Well, I made a mistake last time. I should have, when I said I was going to quit, I should have stayed out of it. I came back and faced the same sort of problems.
Yes.
So this time I don't want to face any more problems.
Yeah. But is it possible, George, I mean, I've known you for a long time. I mean, is it possible, I don't believe it is, you see, for you to live without football?
Well, so far, I don't know how long it is since I've played. It's 3 or 4 months, I think. And I haven't missed it.
You haven't?
Not in the slightest, no.
Let's go back then to the point where you took this decision to end your career. What really was the reason?
It was a mixture of lots of things, in the game and out of the game. I wasn't enjoying playing as much as I had done. I wasn't as fit as I should have been because of my own fault. It was my own fault.
Why was that? You were drinking?
General things, yeah. Nightlife and drinking, I suppose.
Yes.
Too many late nights. And I wasn't enjoying training as much.
Yes.
Which I always had done.
Yes.
Even if I'd been having late nights, I'd always enjoyed the training part of it.
Yes.
But even that was becoming like a job.
Yes.
Which it never had been before.
Yes. But I mean, what about the things in the game that got you down? What were they specifically?
Well, it was basically my own form, the form of the team. I wasn't enjoying the coaching side of it, the training side of it. It was just a general thing around Manchester United at the time.
But what I mean, would it have been any different if you'd gone to any other club?
It might have been, but I wouldn't have let anyone take the chance on paying a lot of money for me and gone to them and maybe done exactly the same things with them, especially after they paid £250,000 for me.
But that's an interesting thing, because what you're really saying is that you can't guarantee your own conduct.
Exactly, yeah.
Really?
Well, I do things in the spur of the moment. Instead of sitting down and thinking about them, I tend to run off and try and think about it, sort them out somewhere else, usually in a different country.
Yes. But this time you've sorted it out, you've come to the conclusion, no more soccer, finished.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So what are you going to do now, then? I mean, what are the alternatives open to you?
Well, at the moment, I've been looking for premises I'm going to open a discotheque. I've just formed a travel agency selling property and land abroad in Spain. And in the morning, I'm going to Toronto to talk over a deal with some people in Toronto.
What kind of a deal is that?
Well, it's a six-a-side tournament that is starting in Canada. It actually started 3 weeks ago when I first went, and they wanted me to play. But if I'd have played, it could have caused problems. But this time they want me to go back. They still want me to play, but they also want me to do some promotional work for them.
What about money, George? Because there's a point when, of course, you were earning a great deal of money. Now the income's dried up because all the money depended on football. I read an article in The People last week, I think it was, which said that, in fact, you were broke. Is that true?
It was funny because I got a phone call, I think, at 10 to 8 in the morning in Acapulco about 2 weeks ago. And I was staying in a beautiful villa with my own swimming pool and bar stools that led onto the bar and a refrigerator and everything, beautiful weather. and I got a phone call at 10 to 8 in the morning from New York, some newspaper phoning me, and they asked me if I was broke. They said they were doing a piece that I was broke. So I said, of course I was. I'd been to Toronto and Los Angeles, San Francisco, back to Los Angeles, Acapulco. I was going to Palm Springs to watch the Bob Hope Classic. I said, of course I'm broke. You know, so how ridiculous can you get? Who do they think was paying for it?
Yes, but I mean, so in fact, you're not broke.
Not at the moment, no.
I mean, are you are you comfortably well off?
Reasonably. I mean, I played since I was 17
yes.
until recently, and it was 9 years. And I was earning good money, and I didn't spend it all. So I'm not well off. I haven't got a lot of money, which is why I'm going to work and make more.
But isn't there, I mean, the more you look at it, George, the more daft it becomes, you see, because here you are with this extraordinary talent. You could have worked till you were, what, 32, 33, 34, something like that, you know, and then retired. I mean, you'd have made a fortune, man. And you just jack it all in.
I might make more than I've jacked it in.
But I hope you do, but I don't think so. I mean, it's the sad thing is that you deny us the pleasure, actually, of watching you play. Do you have no regrets about that at all? Do you have no instinct as an entertainer, which you've always said you were? Do you have no loyalty toward the audience?
I do. A lot of people have asked me that and said, don't you think you owe the public something? I'm not sure whether I do or not. I think I'd like to think I've given them something for 9 years, 10 years. But I just couldn't take what was going on outside of the game. People say, well, how can you have pressures and strains when you're doing something you're getting well paid for, which I don't think we do. You're training, you're keeping fit. But I think to be a British footballer, to play 65, 70 games a year, sometimes 2 and 3 times a week, and at the end of it look forward to, what, 3 or 4 weeks holiday, and have to have, well, sort of not, you've got to do what you're told, really,
yes.
for 11 months of the year.
Yes.
And you can't sort of go mad. You've got to be in bed at reasonable hours, and you can't relax completely. And I think there's a hell of a lot of strain and pressure on footballers. I mean, when I first got into trouble, and they started talking about me being under pressure and a strain, at the same time, there were, I think, 3 or 4 other First Division players who were having troubles. And I think if they'd have been single, as I was, and not married men with responsibilities, I think they would have done exactly the same as I did.
Yes. Why don't you get married?
I can't afford it.
Yeah, I'll speak about that later. But, I mean, no, really, it's a serious question. I mean, you're, what, 27 now, aren't you?
26.
26. You've been out with more birds and have had hot dinners, considerably more. I mean, have you never found anybody that you really wanted to marry?
Not really, no. If I had done, I'd have been very pleased, because I love children. I love kids. And I'd have been the happiest man in the world if I could have found someone. But it's just hasn't happened. I've taken a lot of girls out, and if I'd have met the right one, I would have married her. But I just haven't.
But what's the problem? Is it that they're after Georgie Best superstar rather than Georgie Best ordinary Joe? Is that the problem?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty easy to spot the ones who are after you for your name. Well, I like to think I can. I think it's only common sense. So I don't know what it is, really. Maybe I'm too hard to please. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. You're going to go on looking?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Fun finding out, isn't it? Yeah. What's the... you talked earlier about the pressures within the game, which you objected to. Would one of those pressures be that you found in the game that the game is getting dirtier? That people were kicking you more? That play was getting too hard?
I don't think it was getting dirtier. I think the game was becoming less enjoyable in Britain.
Yes.
I mean, some of the games, I mean, out of the number of games played every week, you're bound to get some good games.
Yes.
It's natural. But I think generally the game was becoming a lot more boring to watch.
Yes.
I mean, games I've watched in other countries, I mean, they've been tremendous to watch, say, Brazil or the West Germans play when they're really on song. And then to watch British football, there's just something missing. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's too much discipline, too much method. I don't know. What is it?
It'll never get better as long as players like you leave it, though, of course. That's the problem with it, you know. I mean, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, there is a lack of individuality in the game, which makes your retirement from it all the sadder. Tell me about the pressures outside of the game, though, that you mentioned, which we didn't really go into. I mean, how one reads stories about you being involved in punch-ups in pubs and all this kind of thing. I mean, to be honest, George, I mean, is a lot of it your fault?
No, well, I don't walk into pubs and walk up to people and ask them if they want to fight. And apparently that's what people think I do. I've always had that. If I walked in a bar or a club, it happens all the time. You know, there's always someone who wants to come up and hit you over the head with a pint pot, and they go into work on Monday morning and tell their mates that they've done it. And I used to put up with it, but I started to think, well, if they're going to walk up and threaten you with a pint pot, if you smack them in the mouth first, they're not going to walk in and tell their mates that they sorted you out if they got a black eye and their bloody nose, are they?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, this was a real problem, was it? I mean,
It was, and it wasn't. It happened, you know, everywhere. I mean, I've been hit over the head by a 65-year-old woman.
Really?
You know, in a club, sitting watching a show, and she's walked up and hit me over the head with a handbag.
Why?
You tell me. Maybe she wasn't enjoying the show, I don't know.
She was probably that woman from the Royal Mountain Laughing. You remember? Used to hit people with the handbags.
So what do you do? It's a 65-year-old woman. What can you say, or what can you do? You just got to sit there and take it.
That's really extraordinary. Mm. What other sort of things used to upset you as well, and sort of outside of the game? I mean,
well,
didn't you enjoy being a superstar at all?
I did at first. I built my own image up first of all.
You did?
And then I was sorry for it when I got to 22, 23. I mean, just to go out anywhere at night and just sit and watch a show and try and have an enjoyable evening, and 99% of the time know that when you come out, someone's going to have slashed your tyres or gone around your car with a 6-inch nail.
Really?
It's pretty hard to sit and relax.
Yes. But other people have gone through this and have survived it, George. I wonder what it is about you that's made you chuck it in.
Well, maybe I just didn't want to put up with it. Maybe other people were willing to put up with it, and I wasn't. And I could afford not to put up with it.
Yes.
And this last 2 or 3 months, I don't think I've ever been as relaxed as I am.
You're feeling good, are you?
Yeah, I feel great.
I'll tell you what, mate, you're putting weight on. Look there. Eh? Aren't you?
That's why I feel good.
Really? And do you think then, George, that you've got a future in this country? Because, I mean, it's all very well saying that you're out of football now, but you're not really out of the limelight still, are you? I mean, you're still, wherever you go, you're recognised, and I suppose there's some pressure on you in that extent. Are you going to stay here?
Yeah, well, that will probably be a problem. I don't know how long it'll last, maybe 2, 3 years. So what I'm doing, if the businesses don't go well, that I'm planning on starting in England, then I'll try somewhere else. I'll maybe try it in America.
You enjoyed the States, did you?
I loved it, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a great time in Mexico. I actually played in Mexico. In
Did you?
Acapulco, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What, beach football was it, or what?
No, it was, when I arrived, I stayed at a tennis club. And, yeah, of course, the Mexicans are football crazy. And as soon as I signed in, they asked me if I'd play for them. I hadn't even finished signing my name, and they asked me to play.
Yeah.
It was only a load of waiters. But it was nice to go out. It was 85 degrees. I don't know how I got through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was nice to play with them, and one of the nicest things that happened to me while I was away happened after the game, because they were so pleased that I played for them. They couldn't believe it when they asked me, and I put the strip on and went out and played. And as I come off, a little Mexican come up, and he said, oh, you're a nice man. He said, I read English papers all the time, and they say you're a bad man. He said, I don't believe them. It was nice.
Yeah, that is nice. Well, George, I do wish you luck, mate, in in your coming business ventures. I'm still saddened, very sad, that we're not going to see you play football again, and I hope it's not true. But anyway, George, best thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. George, in fact, has got to shoot off now up to Manchester because, as he mentioned, he's off to North America tomorrow. Well, if you mention the word poet to most people, they reach for the sleeping tablets. Well, there's one poet who manages to bridge that hitherto unbridgeable gap between the public and his art. The Times said, and I quote, he succeeded better than his contemporaries in narrowing the gulf between poetry and the public, end quote. He is the opposite of that rarefied creature in the garret writing about things we don't understand. Instead, he writes poems about Slough and Sheffield and billiard halls. He is our poet laureate, Sir John Betjeman. So, John, I think we should first of all explain the music that you walked onto. It's the Teddy Bear's Picnic, which might seem irrelevant, except that people who know you know that you have a teddy bear called Archie.
That's true, yes. I've had him most of my life, all my life, as long as I can remember. I don't, he's rather a private thing, and I always have regarded him as reliable because he doesn't have to be exercised, he doesn't have to be fed, he looks the same, and he doesn't let you down.
Why do you keep him, though, Sir John? I mean, it's...
Well, I don't pay very much, I don't pay any attention to him. And we're talking about him as though he was a human being. I think a bear just represents, well, some people have cats and dogs and they die. And some people have budgerigars and canaries. It isn't anything, it's an inner side. We've all got it. I expect you have some sort of thing that you rely on.
Yes, it's called a wife. How did, I mean, has it ever caused any sort of tension in your marriage, Sir John? I mean, how did your wife get on with it?
Oh, quite all right. Took it for granted. And I used to say, well, he doesn't complain or something like that. It annoyed her a good bit, I suppose, but it didn't matter. Yes. Not a deep thing.
No, no, so something sort of trivial. Yes. But I read in the cuttings when I was reading up about you, I read that your daughter said that in fact your wife was more eccentric than you. That's always accepting that you're eccentric. But I mean, is this so? I mean, is she...
Oh, she's a wonderful person, and I would say much more eccentric than I am.
Really?
But she thinks that everybody else is dotty that doesn't think as she does. She likes going abroad very much, and she's very fond of horses. And I don't much like horses.
Why is that?
Well, I used to tell the children that came round our stables to be careful as they sting, I said, about horses. That you never know what's going to happen next.
You've written a lot about women, haven't you, in your poems?
Yes.
A certain type of
Yes.
woman, wasn't she? Was a sort of a sun-kissed golden sports girl, wasn't she?
Always, yes.
Always. Yes, why was that?
I suppose the reverse of yours truly, she was. I've always admired people who were taller than myself, stronger, and I liked we all have different sorts of colors we like in girls and in people generally. I like freckles, turned up noses, wide apart grey-blue eyes, and locks thrown loosely back, and sulky lips, and a hint of latent power.
That sounds very exotic, actually. That's. I mean, have your taste changed at all over the years?
No, that kind of... I've always noticed that people I like the look of, and I think we're first attracted by looks, whatever people may say,
yes,
have that sort of colouring.
Yes, yes. Can I talk to you now about the job of being Poet Laureate? How do you see the job itself, Sir John? I mean, how do you see your duties, if you like?
Oh, anything involving duties is terrifying, and you feel you're going to fail. It's very unpleasantly prominent. You feel you're sitting on top of a paper mountain which may give way at any minute. It was a great honor and exciting to be made it, but it leaves me dumbfounded and very nervous sometimes. I don't know whether I'm going to... Oh, ought the Poet Laureate to write this, you say, when you're writing a line you think's frightfully good?
Yes. Yes.
It can be inhibiting.
Yes. What about the sort of traditional role of the Poet Laureate, of writing things for royal occasions and this sort of thing? I mean, this has never been in your work at all before, has it?
I have mentioned, yes, I wrote a poem once about the death of King George V, but I can't remember it. And I have written occasionally on state occasions when got carried away by an event. I don't think you can write about something in anticipation of an event.
Yes.
You can only write about it when it's happened.
Yes.
And I think, do you remember when the wars broke out? Everybody knew there was going to be a war, but they couldn't be certain when it was. And when it did break, everybody knew within about 20 minutes, without listening to the wireless or anything. You could feel it. And that, I think, is possibly connected with public writing. I can't do public writing. The person who really did it superbly was Tennyson.
Yes.
Tennyson's Charge of the Light Brigade and Ode on the Death of the Duke of Wellington. There was nobody to touch the old boy.
Yes. Well, but why, what interests me, as I mentioned at the head of the programme, is that you have bridged this gap between poetry and the public. Your poems are terribly popular, read by a lot of people I know who wouldn't consider reading poetry normally. Why do you think this is, Sir John?
It's very nice of you to have said that. And it absolutely staggers me that if it's true.
It is true.
Because I can't believe it. I always think it's luck that it's happened. I think it is luck. I think there are things outside one's control. It's the most lovely thing to have happened, if the people do. I've heard, though, that I'm sometimes set for O-levels. Well, I remember how much I disliked the people who were set for O-levels when I was a child. I thought they couldn't be any good because they were O-levels.
Yes.
In exams. So I wasn't in those days.
Yes.
O-levels,
Yes.
common entrance and things.
I wonder, yes, it used to worry me at school, actually, just the very basic idea of having to do an examination in poetry.
It's an awful idea,
I think
isn't
it's
it?
stupid, don't
and
you?
as soon as people start explaining
Yes.
what is it, you should either understand or...
Well, totally. I had a
Yes.
master at school who used to break down every poem line by line and analyse it.
kills it.
Well, that's like breaking down a beautiful building, isn't
Awful.
it? To see the
Absolutely
cement
breaking it
between.
into bits and yes. And then you thought, oh, Lord, we've got another 6 lines to go or something
Yeah,
like that.
that's right, yes.
And look at the clock.
Yes.
Awful.
And that's possibly why poetry isn't as acceptable in this country as it ought to be.
I think it's been killed by Englit.
Englit, yes. Yes, that's a horrible phrase, isn't it? What is the function of a poet, though, Sir John? We had W.H. Auden, who, of course, you know,
Yes.
on this programme, who said the only duty of a poet, in fact, is to preserve the language.
Oh, that's very true.
You'd agree with that?
Yes, but sometimes the language changes and you have to use the newer words, which I do. I think primarily it's to say things simply, shortly, rhythmically, memorably. And it's luck, it's inspiration. There is such a thing as inspiration.
Yes.
And when you tell me that thing, if it's true, that my poetry is read by lots of people who don't ordinarily read poetry, that's all I could want to happen. I remember when very young, and when my first book of poems came out, I wanted it to be in paper and on newsprint so that everybody could get it.
Yes, yes.
It's very funny that that should have happened.
Yes, indeed. And most poets, a lot of poets become very obscure, don't they? They seem to write for their private innards rather than for public consumption. I think
Yes, but I must tell you this. I have an idea that poetry is ahead of its time very often. I can remember when Eliot's Waste Land, first came out. It seemed to me absolutely incomprehensible. And about 6 years later, it was simple and easy, just the same words.
Yes, yes. Could you, you were talking there about the early days of when you wrote poetry. Could you read us an example of one of those early poems that you did?
I can't remember my verse once it's out.
You can't?
I'd have to get a copy of it, and I can see one waiting here.
Yes, just by chance we got it there.
Yeah.
Really? Honestly?
It's short.
Can you read it all right,
Yes,
Sir
it's
John?
called In a Bath Tea Shop. Let us not speak for the love we bear one another. Let us hold hands and look. She, such a very ordinary little woman. He, such a thumping crook. But both, for a moment, little lower than the angels in the tea shop's ingle nook.
What inspires that kind of poetry, Sir John? Was there an incident that you saw?
It happened in Bath just before the war, and I saw two people, I suppose they must have been from the Admiralty, in a tea shop in a street which has been demolished now, like so many of the small old streets of Bath, a little alley, now demolished, and that's where it happened, and I saw it, and it was in that very tense time before war broke out.
Yes. Yes. What about you? You're now, as I say, the poet laureate, and your other great passion, when you mentioned there, touched on there, is preservation of old buildings and things like that. Yeah, I know you're very keen on it. Do you in fact think that now in your position as poet laureate, that is something where you could lend even more weight and influence than you've had before?
I'd like to.
Yes.
And I'd like to be able to write about, well, the destruction of Bath, which is going on apace at the moment.
Yes.
People taking down the unimportant,
yes,
in order to show up the grand. Everything is a gradual growth, and you can't live in a new, planned, bright town. You like familiar bits of skyline and familiar things. It's part of us.
Yes.
And I think when people pull down corner shops we've known, or corner public houses, or churches that they regard as redundant, they're taking away part of ourselves. They're robbing us, just as bad as burglars.
Yes. But, I mean, some people would say, I suppose, that that's progress, Sir John.
Yes, and of course it isn't.
It isn't?
I don't think so, no. People think progress means everything exactly the same, everybody having the same sort of entertainments, and no variation. Well, it can't be progress. And don't you think bigger means worse? Nearly always.
Yes, I think you're probably right there, certainly. But I mean, what basically is wrong with us? That I mean, who are the people who are doing this to us?
I don't know. Do you think it could possibly be that we are inclined to think everybody knows better than we do, and to take orders from a sort of them we've invented? Because when you meet those sort of people that I always find very tiresome, the kind of civil servant who thinks he is the judge, and he knows good from bad, and you must take what he says as right because it's for your own good. We always feel we're in the charge of those sort of people, and when you meet them, they're not like that at all.
What are they like?
Oh, ones I've met very nice. The higher up they are, the nicer. I imagine the top civil servants are great people. I think the most horrible sort of person we suffer from now is the flash executive.
Really?
Those sort of, am I talking too much?
No, not at all, sir. Not at all. No, I think I'm absolutely fascinated by it. Really, I am.
Well, I've got a bit of stuff ready.
Have you?
About an executive.
All right, well, that's fine. Please read it. But before you do that, I mean, how do you identify these? Are they physically identifiable?
Yes, you know them exactly. They have very expensive cigarette case, and tap it. They speak in a very quiet voice. They have the best seat on the aeroplane and in the bus and in the train long before you've got there. They don't have to take any trouble. They sit back in chauffeur-driven cars. We don't know who they are. They read the paper, they don't look out, they never use their eyes, and the secret of being alive is using your eyes all the time. Towns are just as interesting as the country. Shops and makes of lampposts and even coal holes are interesting.
Yes.
Because they're connected with people. Yeah. They I associate with the faceless new blocks of offices, those merciless cliffs of houses that so-called enlightened councils have put up to house families hundreds of feet in the air, and their children playing down below, practically out of sight. It's terrifying.
Yes, yes.
They stand for that, in my mind.
And you've done a poem to celebrate them?
Yes. Well,
celebrate wasn't perhaps the best word.
Probably they've got weak spots. This poem certainly has. I am a young executive. No cuffs than mine are cleaner. I own an oblong briefcase and I use the firm's Cortina. In every roadside hostelry from here to Burgess Hill, Les Maitres d'Hotel all know me well and let me sign the bill. You ask me what it is I do. Well, actually, you know, I'm partly a liaison man and partly PRO. Essentially, I integrate the current export drive, and basically, I'm viable from 10 o'clock till 5. For vital off-the-record work, that's talking transport-wise, I've a Scarlet Aston Martin, and does she go, she flies. Pedestrians and dogs and cats, we mark them down for slaughter. I also own a speedboat which has never touched the water. She's built of fiberglass, of course. I call her Mandy Jane, after a bird I used to know. No soda, please, just plain. And how did I acquire her? Well, to tell you about that and to put you in the picture, I must wear my other hat. I do some mild developing. The sort of place I need is a quiet country market town that's rather run to seed. A luncheon and a drink or two, a little savoir-faire. I nobble half the council, the banks, the clerk, the mayor. And if some preservationist attempts to interfere, a dangerous structure notice from the borough engineer will settle any buildings that are standing in our way. The modern style, sir, with respect, has really come to stay.
And that's beautiful. See, I think the marvellous thing about that, Sir John, is that you make people laugh while making a serious point.
That's very kind of you.
But they laughed. I mean, it's not flattery. They laughed. You made them laugh. And, I mean, I know that you don't like being called a humorous poet, because, I mean, there's more to your work than that. But you do use humour, don't you, as a weapon?
I think it's essential. And, in fact, without jokes, you can't really like people. The only way one can get on is by jokes.
Really?
Oh, yes, it's a form of affection.
Yes.
My wife and I get together frightfully well, and we laugh at the same things.
Yes, yes.
She's in what she calls the Himalayas, and I call the Himalayas now, so that I don't know what she's doing at the moment.
Well, but what is she doing up there, Sir John?
I bet she's on a horse.
I hope it doesn't sting her. It is an extraordinary life you have, because, in fact, you sort of come together at weekends occasionally, don't you? And
oh, yes.
Because your wife loves the country. And,
yes, and so do I.
Yes, and you live in town.
I live in the city of London at the moment, but that's been turned into a hell by the noise of traffic, container lorries coming up to Smithfield Market in the middle of the night, and noise going on from the early morning onwards, a glorious quiet when the real country comes into London is on Saturday and Sunday.
Yes.
That's when you find it quieter than the country, because automatic farming, or whatever it's called, all those tractors and things are much noisier than the suburbs of London.
Yes, and those horses snorting and all that sort of thing, yes. In fact, I once spent the most delightful weekend in London on a bank holiday, when I had the city to myself. And I walked through the city and I saw...
Isn't it marvellous?
Yes, and I saw things that I'd never seen before, at all.
The little lanes, there used to be, but that go to the churches.
Right.
And made for walking in.
Right.
How marvellous. And don't you find, when you walk in a town, an old town, straight streets are a bore, but winding streets lead you on to something else?
Yes, of course. And that's what's wrong, of course, with the modern architecture, is the sort of symmetry of the straightness of...
It's made to be seen from an executive's car. It's never made from...
The firm's Cortina.
Firm's Cortina,
absolutely, yeah. You mentioned earlier something that interested me, and that was this thing about we don't use our eyes. I suppose it's true, isn't it, really? We can walk down the same street for 100 times and not see something because we don't look.
And then somebody comes along and points it out to you, and you're grateful to them.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. But I mean, you have an extraordinary eye for things like this, don't you? I mean, have you always had this since being a child?
Yes. I think it was because of my father, who was deaf, and therefore he looked at everything. And he used to point things out to me, because I couldn't answer to him, except through in those days there weren't the instruments there are now for deaf people.
What, did he have, an ear trumpet?
Yes.
Did he?
So you had to think before you said anything. But he would always point, he had the most wonderful eye for buildings and for fake in antique shops. He could tell a real thing from a fake, and he would point it out to you. And he knew about birds and beasts, and he was a very keen sportsman, which I've never been. And that, I think, as early as I can remember, made me aware of my surroundings.
Yes, yes. You said that you've never been a sportsman. In fact, you were once a cricket coach, weren't you?
Oh, yes, but that was only in extremis.
Why?
I mean, I was sent down from Oxford and went to a private school and had to teach. So you could do anything but to get the job. And that's how I got it. I said I'd have said anything, like in the Evelyn Waugh book, Decline and Fall, when it said he said he could play the organ. Fortunately, wasn't asked to, but I was asked to play cricket, and I had to get a Charles Lett's schoolboy's diary to find out the names of the places on the field. I'd forgotten more. Mid-on, Silly Point, and those sort of things.
Yes. Did you get found out eventually, did you?
I was found out,
yes.
and put to taking the lowest, worst game, yes.
Yes.
And, but then there was a triumphant man. I'm talking too much.
No, of course not.
No, leading me on.
Yeah. Yes, well, that's my job.
I don't think I can remember it in detail enough. It would bore people. It goes on for too long. But I do remember that a very tough egg, who was a new master with me at one school I taught at, was put in charge of the first game after it was seen how rotten I was. But he and I and the gym mistress, Miss Vera Spencer Clark, as she was then, used to drive over to the Cock Tavern at Cock Foster's after school in the evenings. And then there was prize day, which is the most important part in a school's year. And of course, the most sacred part of the school is not the chapel, but the cricket pitch in the summer term. And we went along to the Cock, and this man who triumphed over me, well, when we were, he had a little round-nosed Morris, which dates it a bit. We drove in at the school grounds after we'd been to the Cock, in and out the rhododendrons, and then over the cricket pitch. And it was prize day next morning. Well, he left. And I survived another 2 terms.
And the cricket pitch was ruined. I don't know.
Well, it was noticed. Yeah.
Well, Sir John, for the moment, that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much indeed. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
What do I do? Get up, remain seated.
With our show since the very beginnings, way back in prehistory, have been Harry Stoneham and his 5. They've provided the backing music to the various singers that we've had in the show. They are, in fact, splendid musicians in their own right. And tonight, we're going to give them the chance to reveal their talents. The Harry Stoneham 5 playing a number written by Harry Stoneham called It All Happens on Saturday. But are they? Someone once said that the star's dictum about never acting with children or animals should also be applied to my next guest. Someone else said that she sighs with the air of one whose foot has just found another banana skin. And somebody else remarked that she had a voice like a strangulated dove. Well, all those are just tags to inadequately describe one of Britain's finest actresses. She won an Oscar for her performance in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie and has been nominated for another Oscar for her latest film, Travels with My Aunt. And here she is in a scene from that film.
Tell me, Henry, what do you actually do at the bank?
Oh, well, I'm the man with all the keys.
Oh, then you could rob the bank.
Yes, of course. But I wouldn't.
Oh, but if you were desperate for money, a great deal of money?
Aunt Augusta, one just doesn't.
Why not?
I could never be a criminal. I learned early on that we get out of life precisely what we put into it. No more, no less.
Balls.
What did the lady say? Ladies and gentlemen, Maggie Smith. My word, that was a splendid scene, wasn't it? Hey?
I'm sorry that you couldn't see Alec, but I understand it's because it's on cinema.
Yes, Alec McGowan was your co-star in
That's
the film,
yes.
yes. We had to show one or the other. And as you're the guest and not Alec, well, then we thought it would be right.
I know.
You also had the best line, actually, as well. Well, I mentioned there, actually, Maggie, that in fact you've been nominated for an Oscar for that performance.
Yes.
What exactly does that mean to you when you hear that you've been nominated? I mean, are you pleased? Or?
Well, yes, I'm very, very pleased in this because I was very, very much last minute in the film.
Yes, because Catherine Hepburn was...
Yes, exactly, and for reasons that I don't think are clear to anybody except for Miss Hepburn, obviously, and Mr. Cuco and the powers that be in MGM. I don't really know what happened. But I am delighted because there were many struggles in the film, the fact of the age and the makeup and many, many things. And also I'm very pleased for Bobby Fryer, who in actual fact produced
Jean Brodie, right.
and who really fought tooth and nail for me to play the part.
Do you
This
think
is also a film of his, so I'm very glad for him.
Do you think you've got a chance?
I honestly don't think so this time.
Don't you? Why not?
I didn't before. I just don't think so this time.
No.
I really, really don't.
No. Will you be going to the ceremony?
Well, no, I can't. I'll be working.
Of course you're
here,
working, you're doing the private licensing, but in
for
fact...
which I'm deeply relieved, because
Really?
I have been there. I was there when we were playing in Los Angeles, and I had to present an award to, in actual fact, John Mills
Yes.
won it, and it is the most terrifying experience ever.
Why?
I don't know. I think it's probably because it's the one award in the world that people really do not know. They just do not know. And there is something so naked and unkind. The cameras go in on all the people who are likely to get it, and the hope and in their faces. And
we've all got this...
when it goes, you know, you just...
They've all got those stitched-on smiles,
Well,
haven't they?
you know, they
Yeah.
obviously want it so desperately, and of course there it does mean much more than it does to us here. An
Yes.
Oscar is a tremendous, tremendous award to get,
But
really.
did it mean anything for you, though, in real terms, Maggie, when you won it for Jean Brodie? I mean, in terms of work? I mean, did all of a sudden people start ringing you up? and
No, there is a kind of legend which has happened since the Oscars. They always sort of say that you don't work very much after you get one. I don't understand why. I think it goes back to the fact that if you won an Oscar in the old days, let us say, your salary immediately jumped enormously, and of course that cannot happen now. It's unrealistic. So the money thing doesn't come into it. But there is this odd thing that you don't get offered work because
Yeah.
of an Oscar.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
What do you do with the statuette? Do we put it on the sideboard at home or something?
And mine is actually holding a door open.
Really?
And it's very friendly, actually. It's extremely useful for it.
Gold? Is it gold?
No, it's not gold. It's extremely heavy. and no doubt very useful if intruders come in.
Perhaps you should introduce Archie to her Oscar. The door open. Can we talk a bit about acting now and style? I had Robert Helpman on the programme last week, Maggie, and he was saying that when he was learning about theatre, he went to watch all the great actresses like Edith Evans, and came to the conclusion that the great thing that they had was a style which was mainly a voice. Is that something that you would agree with? That they did things with their voices that other people were unable to do?
I'm not quite... No, I don't think that that is quite true. I think to a certain extent. I think it has more to do with the phrasing of things and the way you can turn certain lines.
You mean say certain lines in different ways and give it different meaning?
Yes, phrasing or stressing, various things like that.
Is there an example?
I can't believe that it is all in a voice.
No, no.
I do hope not, because mine isn't frightfully good. As you just said, it sounded like a strangled, what was it?
Strangulated dove, but I didn't say that.
Dove?
Dove.
Oh, I thought you said duck.
No.
Dove is infinitely better. I should relax somewhat.
Can you give an example of the way that you can, by using your voice and inflection, change the sense, the meaning of something?
Well, it's frightfully difficult to do, and it's one of those curious things that if you do get a laugh on a certain line, which is unexpected. I mean, I can only talk about laughs because that is an immediate thing. I've done it once in a play, a coward play, not the one I'm in, because the moment you say something is funny, it's gossamer, it's gone,
yes,
really.
Yes.
I had one line which was very small and not really very funny, and I had to say at a breakfast, this haddock is disgusting. And it is not funny. I mean, nobody has laughed. But the whole situation was such that when I said it, I suppose I summed up the fact that the entire weekend was horrendous. Everything was ghastly, and the haddock was just the final thing. And it summed the whole thing up in one, and the audience roared with laughter. But unfortunately, the critics mentioned it. And after that, it never, ever got a laugh.
Yes. Yeah.
And I often wonder, and I don't really know, I would love to know whether Dame Edith, in fact, went on getting a laugh on her handbag, Mr. Worthing, you know.
Yes,
one wonders, because the line is always in your mind when you think of the play.
Yes.
And of Dame Edith, and I often wonder if it went on being as funny and... You know,
because
once it had been
I know.
realised.
She said something interesting on this programme, actually, Maggie, which is relevant to that. She said that if she ever got a line she didn't understand, she said it as if it were improper.
Yes, well, exactly, and I have followed that.
You have?
Yes,
you
I
have.
remember her saying that some time ago.
And it's something that you think is...
say it as though it's slightly rude.
Yes.
But you've understood, because you're a great actress, I've always noticed that when you've got an audience, you're aware of there's some sort of thing between you and them, which makes it very much harder to act on television or in a film than in a theatre.
It's certainly different, and it is, it's very much more connected with comedy than anything else, this rapport.
It's lovely.
And what I think audiences don't fully understand is how much work they do for you.
Yes.
Without a good audience, you are absolutely sunk.
Yes, right.
I mean, they do so much. It's quite extraordinary. They lighten your load and your spirits.
Yes.
And you find the whole evening it's what you said about jokes. One cannot live without jokes.
Oh, they're most important.
It makes you fond of people. You become fond of the audience. They become fond of you, and everything is easier.
Yes. Can we have a look at a film that you made, the film that in fact got you the Oscar, which was Jean Brodie, yeah. And it's a scene with Robert Stevens coming up here.
You've been painting Jenny.
Yes, that's right.
I am glad, very glad. She's getting more beautiful each year. She quite amazes me. You see it too. You're an artist. You see things other men don't see. You must see it.
Jenny's quite a pretty girl.
Pretty? No, it's much more than that. She has extraordinary physical instincts, primitive and free.
Primitive, little Jen. What are you up to, Jean?
I'm only trying to tell you that I've always felt that Jenny could be magnificently elevated above the ordinary run of flowers.
What are you talking about?
It's just that I've always known that one day you would paint Jenny.
Paint Jenny? Jean, I think you're quite aware of what you're doing. You're trying to put that child in my bed in your place.
You, in fact, made your name, really, as a review artist, didn't you,
Yes,
Maggie?
I started it.
Yeah. Did you enjoy doing review?
Well, it's a mixture, really. I didn't really want to do it. It was just one of those things that happened.
Yes.
I was at Oxford. I lived in Oxford. And I went to a drama school that started there, and I did so many things, you know, around the universities there. You know, if you were kind of clever enough and, I suppose, quick enough, you could almost do a weekly rep, because all the colleges were doing different productions at different times.
Right. Mm.
And we, in actual fact, used to go up to Edinburgh and were the first of the fringe shows up there. With, you know, people like Ned Sherrin, who are
Yes.
now doing different things.
Yes, but that was right at the beginning of the whole
Yes.
sort of business thing. How difficult was it, though, moving from, making the transition from review to legitimate theatre?
Well, it didn't strike me as very difficult. The awful thing is, I don't know quite how to explain it, but things get more and more difficult as you go on. When you start in the theatre, and I suppose really when you start with anything, you have a kind of extraordinary conceit. It doesn't really enter your mind that it is going to be as difficult as it is. It's the more you do, the more you realize that well, about my profession anyway, that it is an extremely difficult one.
Yeah.
But when you start, you are blind to the problems. You just sort of wade in and have a feeling that if you know the words and don't bump into the furniture, as Noel would say, you're going to be all right. But so, I mean, it wasn't an enormous transition.
I mean, what you're saying really is that's the difference between being stage-struck and a practical professional, isn't it?
Yes, well, I mean Pamela Brown, who is a marvellous actress,
Yes.
said that in actual fact, you know, one is not stage-struck oneself. The audience is stage-struck.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
an actress isn't really,
Yes,
or an actor.
yes.
I've always thought that the most difficult thing to be must be a variety artist, a solo act.
Well, I think absolutely terrifying.
Yes.
I mean, I really do.
Yes.
That, you know, stand up on your own with nothing to rely on.
And do a turn.
And do it on a Monday morning or something, rehearsing in front of with the electricians banging things.
Can you do that, though, Maggie? Can you?
I couldn't, because I would just faint dead away.
Really?
Yes, I mean, I need desperately the text and other actors. I just couldn't bear to stand there on my own.
What about you, Sir John? Could you stand up and do a turn?
No.
No.
No, it's frightening
No.
thought.
The producer is between one. You are our salvation now.
Yeah.
The producer is another salvation. But to come in at a theatre, say Motherwell, and do an act all on your own, early in the morning, not feeling very well because you know it was coming on in the afternoon, with a bored and indifferent people connected with the front of the house there, must be terrifying. And then unless you, I'm told, as I've known lots of variety people, that unless you can get yourself across in the first minute, you've had it.
That's right.
Yes.
Start throwing things at you.
Yeah.
When you were doing, can I? Well, I must break
Please
in.
ask a question. Please.
When you were doing
it's
this-
that kind of program. I'm useless. I'm just absolutely superfluous to the occasion.
When you were doing this acting in Oxford, did you have to? You were near variety then, weren't you? Near.
No,
musical.
review. I mean, it was when I was acting in Oxford, is putting it very elaborately. I was an ASM at the Playhouse in Oxford, which
yes.
involved making endless cups of tea and playing maids. You know, it was just Actually, I auditioned for Kenneth Williams once, and he said, "What have you played?" And I said, "Nothing. I've played maids. I haven't done anything." And he said, "Well, there are some good ones. There's the Maid of Orleans." And I said, "Well, I haven't played that." I'm desperate. I didn't get the part either.
No. Can I ask you about playing comedy, Maggie? Because it delights you, obviously, to do comedy. You like doing comedy.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does one have to be a necessarily funny person to be a comedian?
No, I think, in actual fact, I think an awful lot of people who are in comedy are very serious.
Yes.
It's an old saying that comedy is a serious business,
Right.
but it is, really.
Yes. Well, so John, just in a moment, can we show a scene, first of all, which shows
Yes,
Miss
or
Smith in a role as a comedian? I have your permission to do that, Sir John.
All right, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, fine. All right, well, it's coming up now, and it's from the new film of Maggie Smith.
Henry? Oh, good morning, Henry.
Ah, where is Wordsworth?
In Paris.
Do you know what that bastard did?
Oh, Henry.
He mixed pot with my mother's ashes.
Yes, Henry, I
Oh, my God.
know. Poor Henry.
Poor Henry, poor mother. I mean, poor...
Yeah, well, poor Angelica, you mean?
Yes.
Well, now, calm down, Henry. What is done cannot be undone. They're putting all the blame on poor Wordsworth.
Well, you may be in serious trouble, too, Aunt Augusta.
And so may you, Henry.
I think the first thing that should be explained, though, Maggie, actually, in case people think you're a different person sitting here, is in fact you're playing a 70-year-old woman in that.
Well, of an indeterminate age,
Yeah,
it's
yes,
described.
yes. But where do you get that voice from, by the way? Where does that?
I've no idea, actually. It was, as I say, all in such a rush. I think once I'd got the makeup and those extraordinary costumes, which were marvellous, and done by Anthony Powell, who did the sets for Private Lives. Once it all got together, it just sort of came.
That's amazing, that once you're so dressed in the part,
Yes,
the voice...
and the physical thing,
the voice
it sort of
grew out of
just
it.
grew out of it.
Yes. I remember Richard Attenborough telling me a story once about Olivier doing a What a Lovely War, it was, in fact.
Ah.
And he couldn't get his hair right. No, but really, and he spent days and days, and eventually he got the hair right, the look, and then he had the character, which
Oh, I
seemed quite
see.
extraordinary.
No, I can
You can see that,
understand,
yeah. It really is extraordinary. Who is the person in all the time that you've worked in the theatre? I mean, you've worked with Olivier, obviously, but who would have been the man or the men who've most influenced you, do you think?
Influenced me, I think directors, in a way, influence you when you have a great deal of rapport with them. Ingmar Bergman certainly influenced me greatly. And another director who I trust implicitly is William Gaskell, Bill Gaskell.
And what about our next guest who's coming on in a moment?
He has indeed influenced me for a very, very long time.
Mr. Williams?
That's right.
Really? Kenneth Williams, is that it?
Yes.
Yes, shall we bring him on now, I reckon?
Please do.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kenneth Williams. There you are, you're an influence, Kenneth.
Yes, I was dying actually to go to the loo back there. I really was. And I kept thinking, I'll miss a bit, you know, I miss a bit that's really important. And they said to me, go on, you must stand by. And I was glued to it watching.
Were you?
I love the involuntary thing, actually. It's interesting you should say, you know, the thing about being lost without the text and all that. And I often thought that when I was much younger, too.
Really?
I suppose until international cabaret and standing up, you know, and doing it on your own, you really do get awfully frightened, but it's interesting. I'm not worried about it now.
Well, where did you get the courage from?
I didn't. I was flung in the deep end, actually. They said, you see, I was on this chat thing, and they said, oh, why don't you do that in between the acts on the show we've got? And I said, oh, I couldn't do that because chat is not even relevant to the acts. And they said, it doesn't have to be. So I said, yes, it must. So I wrote a script. So I thought, I have a text, you see, because this was my hang-up, that I couldn't work with that one. And it died completely. I mean, it was death. So I thought, oh, well, obviously that's no good. So I did the other thing. I did go back to just chatting.
Yes.
Totally irrelevant.
And it became
stuff.
a major part of that show, actually, didn't it? You know, it
Yes, that's true. Yes, one critic said it was sort of Molly Bloom-like reverie.
Yes, all the sort of subconscious coming out.
Yes, yes. I suppose
Very
one does do
interesting,
that
actually.
one
But you did so many of them.
52 episodes, yes. I must have been mad.
What about, I'd like to ask all of you, actually, about critics, because we've shown a sequence from Travels of My Aunt, and it's had what could best be described as a mixed reception here, has it not?
Yes, cool.
Cool,
And
yes,
mixed
yes,
those
cool.
fearful words.
Yes, does it bother you when critics take your work to task?
Well, naturally, because, you know, they're read. They're read sometimes by me, and they can hurt and wound one. Really, in actual fact, with a film, there's nothing one can do. It is there,
right.
and it's finished. If it's a comedy, and I'm sure Ken will agree with this, that if you know that they're not really good, or if they're in any way damaging, then it's best to keep away, because, as I said, comedy is fragile, and if you're going to be struck down or gloomy, it's very hard to buoy yourself up and get your spirits back.
Yes. Do you get affected like that, Kenneth?
I loathe them, and I've got on a record of saying how much I loathe them so many times. It's almost become commonplace, you know. I regard them as...
But Kenneth...
I've always said that the eunuchs and the harem, you know, they're there every night, they see it done every night, but they can't do it themselves. Absolutely useless, you see, and there's a marvelous...
But they're not always, Ken, because always there's a grain of truth. That's what's so unnerving.
Hardly ever, and even if there were, Maggie, I would say this. They might, in what they say, be saying something true, but they've hardly ever earned the right to say it. You see, that's the point.
Yes,
that's the real point. You see, people like these sort of, you know, would-be doyens. They write in Sunday newspapers and look upon themselves as sort of, you know, augurs of what's good taste and what's bad taste. They sit there as though from Olympian heights, you know, discussing other people's work and often damning them in the process. I could show you cuttings that name people as being the best. You know, one of the critics said, not only the best in the Western Hemisphere, nay, N-A-Y, nay, the world. And went on to name people that have trod a path into oblivion. I've not heard of them ever since, you know. And so you begin to think, well, what are they worth? They're all useless, you see, because half the time they're not really doing what a critic should do, that is communicate some sort of affection and love for his subject to the reader. They're really not doing that. What they're really doing is turning a fashionable phrase that might make them well-known, them a reputation, you know what I mean?
I don't honestly think you can lump them all together, because there are, you know, there are some serious ones, and you can learn things,
but basically,
sometimes change.
You would say that they're, to put it crudely, pleasuring themselves rather than
well, the poor things, they've got a rotten job, obviously. I mean, it's a rotten job. I admit that.
Like reviewing.
It's a very frustrating job. I know a lot of them are sort of, what is it, short? A lot of them were frustrated playwrights or something. A lot of them frustrated actors, probably. But, you know, Russell Lovell said that there's something fundamentally ridiculous about criticism insofar as what is good without us saying so.
Yes, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that, I suppose, really exposes the whole thing.
And it also brings out the truth of what you said, that the communicating enthusiasm
Precisely.
is what you should do.
That's what they should be doing. Now, there are certain people that can do it. There are. I mean, I've read Rex Reed, you know, those profiles in New Yorker, and he really does communicate an atmosphere. You do feel, if you're reading that kind of writer, you do feel something of the atmosphere of the show, the entertainment he enjoyed, and he infects you. And this really happens with good teaching, doesn't it? A good teacher, if he takes you into the realm of English literature, poetry. I mean, my English teacher did. He infected me with the spirit of poetry, you know what I mean? And he introduced me to poets, mostly, I must admit, the Romantics. Probably that was my melancholic leaning at the time. Shelley, Keats, Byron, these sort of people. And I've lived with them ever since. I've enjoyed them because he infected me with them. But he didn't do it in any way destructively. Do you see what I mean?
Exactly.
He did it with love and affection. And I'm sure that the real, the criticism that matters in this sense is that kind of thing, not the thing where they're turning a nice phrase, which is a good headline, or something clever, or something catty, or something malignant, which lingers in the memory for a day or so. And it's certainly only for a day or so.
Do you get really melancholic about
Yes.
Do you really,
I can't bear it. I don't belong to a press-cutting agency. There was a time when I longed to see my name in print. Now I see it with dread.
Yes,
And,
it's
I,
sad.
And does it really affect you?
oh, I
mentally?
always believe it's true. I believe anything
Well, that's
that's said
the
against
trouble.
me is true, and anything that's said in my favour is flattery.
Really?
Yes, I never can believe
Yes.
that I'm any good at all.
No, I think,
Well,
again, I think all
yes.
artists desperately need the reassurance from the outside of their own worth. They haven't got it within.
Yes.
I think this is one of the paradoxes of all art, don't you? I mean,
Yes.
that though they may appear very often, artists, to be people of power and strength,
Yes.
in actual fact, the reverse is true. They're the most vulnerable people in the world.
Yes.
I remember going backstage and meeting my idol at the time, Sir Godfrey Toll.
Yes.
And he actually said to me, I mean, he was giving a marvellous performance in the Airs at the Haymarket, and I was sitting in his dressing room. I was full of awe. I was a very young actor and very green. And I couldn't even find words to say how marvellous I thought his performance was. And he said to me, I've been terribly downcast because a woman brought her little boy to see it. He was 10, and he said, my trousers were too high and the socks were showing. And that worried him.
Yes.
This little boy.
Yes. In fact, of course, you were a film critic for one.
Oh, yes, for years, or 2 years. No good at all.
You were no good.
They're absolutely useless.
Why was that, Sir John?
I didn't... well, I love films. It taught me to look at them. And why was I a film critic? Because I wanted the cash. I'd recently married and I had to keep things going. And it was better pay than being an architectural critic,
Yes.
which I'd been before.
Yes.
And when I was offered the job, I had not been to the cinema at all for years. And I've not been since very much because I saw too many.
But what kind of a reviewer, what kind of critic were you?
Oh, if possible, favourable. But in those days, there were things called quickies. Do you remember that they made at Shepperton in no time?
Oh, yes.
And you'd get films that were really very poor for family houses. I preferred them, just as I've always preferred when I had to review books, the popular novelists to the serious ones. But I found that at 10 in the morning, with a little Metro Goldwyn champagne in one's glass, a film, it was very hard to write enthusiastically, and that's why one was aware also that the paper I was on only kept going by the advertising that came from the films, or largely it was kept going by it, and so we were told to write favourable criticisms, or so if you can't write favourably, then you must tell the story. Well, then you had to sit through the whole film. And that's a dreadful, cynical way of talking, but it was how one felt in those days.
Yes.
Seeing the same thing. And when you said earlier, they go on seeing them, poor things, it is awful for them.
Yes.
Reviewing is so uncreative and sad.
Yeah. Kenneth and Maggie, can we talk a little bit now? So we've been talking a bit about show business, about something that Sir John was talking about earlier, about the whole business of preservation and this sort of thing. Is it something that concerns you too? I mean, are you basically on Sir John's side on what he says about this?
I should think Maggie is certainly.
Yes, I am. I see the problem another way because I have two brothers and they're both architects, and they say, but if we go on keeping things standing, what else can we build? I suppose really our problem here is that we are just a small island.
But the examples of planning blight that you do see, things like the dreadfulness of the Elephant and Castle, which used to be a place of humanity and warmth and people, which is now just a concrete desert and a mess and an absolute disgrace. And what they've turned the Euston Centre into is the same thing, and just a blight.
Frightful.
And this sort of thing is
I
really
don't
an
understand
absolute
that thing
disgrace.
in Tottenham
Moreover, any
Court Road.
government, well,
What's
exactly,
that?
I mean, any government, and it was the Labour government, I believe, which had the power, could have turned the whole thing into flats for people, left the whole thing standing empty all the time. It's a national scandal, did nothing about it at all. The Office Development Permit, it wasn't introduced by who was the man? The Lord, you know, the man that was Foreign Secretary. Who was he under the Labour government administration?
Oh,
he introduced
Brown.
George Brown.
George Brown.
Yes, he introduced the office development prohibition, you know. He stopped offices being built, but only in the last 2 years of the government, when it should have been done miles before. The first act of a socialist government, a government which says it's socialist, the first act they should make is to stop all that and say homes. Homes, the most important thing. Makes me sick when I read all this crap about, oh, let's have a youth club, let's have a theatre built, or let's have something else built. No good all that. that. Cultural activities are no good if there's no home to go to, is it?
Absolutely true.
You must have a home.
Yes.
So the first
and
requisite
if
is a
possible,
home.
on the ground.
Well, I was going to say...
Precisely. It makes me very angry, that.
Yes.
It really makes me very angry, doesn't it, you, to pass a great thing empty, a great skyscraper empty?
Right. I absolutely
I think it's
agree with
absolute scandal. And yet they can all get worked up over a couple of pounds in their pay packet or something and go on strike. Why can't, I mean, if unions really care, if they're really socialistic and say we care about our fellow man, why can't they march about something like that? Instead of another pound for themselves, why not a few pounds for somebody else who's really hard up?
But that's not the union's problem.
I've got support here.
It's not the union's fault, that
Yes,
condition.
look, what is
that
the statue
condition.
outside the TUC? Have you looked at that statue?
But it's...
The statue outside the TUC depicts a man helping, doesn't it? He's helping up another man who's on the ground.
Yes.
And that statue symbolises what the TUC stands for, doesn't it?
Of course.
Right, well, when a union does something like jeopardising the work of their fellow men, if you stop trains, people can't get to their work, can they? Can they? They can't get to work, even. So in doing what you want for yourself, you're jeopardising your fellow men, aren't you?
Yes.
Well, why can't you act in concert with your fellow men? Why do you have to do something which endangers the livelihood of your fellow men? When that statue represents exactly that, helping,
because it
not
might,
hindering.
Because it might be that the fellow, that one fellow, to take two workers, that one fellow is a lot worse off than the other worker. They're not all equal, are they? I mean, if they were all equal, there'd be no problem.
Precisely, but it comes down to a question of morality. You don't just work for another pound. When I took my job at £3.10 a week, ASM in small parts, I come out the army, 47, that's what I got. 47, or £3.10 a week, my digs were 25 bob all in. And the rest, I had the soap and the fags, you know. And with the odd bit of harpic to shove round the bend, because I did my own cleaning. But I saved, and because I wanted to do the job and wanted to do it well, I got another rep fortnightly, and then after that I got monthly rep, you know, and I got a bit better. I did 7 years in the provinces before I came to London. And I think if you're prepared to do that kind of thing, you're doing it. What are you doing it for? You're not saying I want another pound all the time. You're saying I want to do the work better.
Yes, but
now, that was the kind of morality I was brought up with. But don't do a job just for what you get. You do the job because you want to do it well.
Oh, but Kenneth, can I say I think that's crap? I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I really...
I've never been so insulted.
Kenneth?
Don't take
Whose side you on?
See, it's all very well you saying that. It's all very well all of us here in jobs that are creative, where you can see if you go work, if you've got a talent, you can get to the top, and you can get, you know, handsome living. Now, you're not going to tell me that you are going to be compared with somebody who's sticking door handles on a car for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, that he's not going to get frustrated, that he doesn't deserve an extra quid if he wants one? Of course his work ethic is money. It's got to be. He doesn't get the satisfaction from the job that we get. I mean,
that's true.
You
of course
are
it's true.
You've talked...
Of course it's true.
His inference is the man who's sticking the doorknobs on has got a job that's monotonous and dreary.
Absolutely.
What do you think doing something night after night? I've done this play now at the Globe. I mean, I've said it so many times I'm beginning to wonder what it means, you know. You keep on saying anything long enough and you begin to think you're daft, don't you?
I mean, that's the trouble. I mean, everybody does seem to think that our work is glamorous.
It's
I mean,
fabulous.
why?
They're fabulously glamorous. Not at all. It's a simple business of self-discipline and going on night after night and doing it as well as you can.
Right, fine.
And if I have to stick doorknobs on, and I've done it,
Yes.
I've stuck doorknobs on, I've painted my own walls when I haven't got the money to employ a decorator, I'll do it because I like doing it and I want to do it well.
But the other difference is, Kenneth, that the guy who goes on strike is not earning your salary. He's not earning 400 or 500 quid a week.
What about the period I didn't
did I
have any
sell you short?
success? And I spent, what, 7 years in the provinces, bumming around. That wasn't very successful.
No, of course not. But there was always because you backed your talent, because your talent went in an area where talent pays off in the end, then you had a horizon. You could see ahead.
Well, what are you asking
But
for? A
these
world where every single job leads to some marvellous end?
Yes.
Well, all jobs
Yes.
can't be like that.
Well, precisely. And that's the problem.
But nevertheless...
I mean, so therefore you must allow people their frustrations.
No, they must accept their limitations, surely.
We don't get pensions.
Come on.
They must be allowed to.
That's a Superman argument.
It isn't. Voltaire said every man must dig in his own bit of garden. There wasn't much wrong with Voltaire's philosophy, was there?
No.
Sir John, could we have a calm word, because Kenneth and I are getting rather excited.
Well,
By the way, do you know what they say his last words were, Voltaire?
no.
They said, but apparently a priest came and they said, you know, will you now make your peace? and renounce the devil. Renounce the devil and all his work. And he said, oh, it's a bit late in the day to be making enemies.
Sir John, were you going to say something about...
I've forgotten.
And I don't blame you at all. I don't blame you at all. Poetry. Let's talk about poetry for
Well,
because...
some of his lines have absolutely reverberated in my head.
Yes.
And we were talking about you the other day. You weren't there. And Maggie was quoting a thing of yours which has always stayed in her head. What was that line you were saying?
The phone for the fish knives, Norman.
The phone for the fish knives, Norman, that poem.
Yes.
And I was saying the one that always stays in my head is the, you know, the prayer of the lady about the air raids. It says, Lord, keep beneath thy special care 149 Cadogan Square. Which I loved.
Yes. And come friendly bombs and fall on Slough.
Yes, you shouldn't mention
All the trouble I got in with that.
Did you have trouble ever?
Yes, that was when I was a prep school master on 30 quid a term in Gerrard's Cross.
Really?
Yes, all in, of course, but still didn't leave you much for cigarettes.
No. But no Harpic.
No.
And what kind of problem did it create? Did you...
Well, you can't libel a corporation, thank goodness. You can libel an individual, like the borough engineer or somebody like that, but not a conglomerate body. But they've always, they've been very nice and generous to me in Slough, considering I was about 19 when I wrote that, and I'm now, goodness knows how old, 65, nearly 66. Why it should be remembered, I can't think. In those days, there was everyone was very horrified by the new tendencies of things coming. We could see the evil world of tall skyscrapers and nothingness that we've been describing arriving. And that was what the anger of that poem was about. And the lack of consideration for the individual as a separate person. Why I must go on for a second. Why I like actors very much, and is because they're givers, not takers.
Yes.
And it's the takers we're always fighting against. You have to spend your whole time every day doing that thing of being en rapport with the audience. Very exhausting.
Yes. What one poet called the eternal reciprocity of tears. You see, to understand about comedy is to understand that, because the pathos, which has got to be inherent in a comedy performance, if you haven't got it, you haven't got any comedy. If they're not really basically sorry and really identifying with your situation. There's a poem by Hal Burton somewhere about, you know, Caesar must die in them. You know, their lives must be rehearsed, their deaths must pass.
Kenneth, we are sadly running out of time.
It's a disgrace, you say. It's much longer. I asked for over an hour last time. I was sandwiched in for a couple of minutes. It's a disgrace. It really is.
I tell you what, you don't have to make good use of those couple of minutes, though, don't you? Kenneth, you were going to read, I believe.
Oh, yes, I got it here.
Because you like me, we're not flattering. We are a Betjeman fan.
Yes.
No, yes, we were talking about this.
And
We're going to do this one.
Yes.
We're going to read this together.
Please.
So now, you want to tell them the title?
Yes, the title is called Death in Leamington, and it's one of the earliest first poems you ever wrote, Sir John,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes. First poems I got published, yes.
First published, yes. Could you?
She died in the upstairs bedroom by the light of the evening star that shone through the plate glass window from over Leamington Spa.
Beside her, the lonely crochet lay patiently and unstirred, but the fingers that would have worked it were dead as the spoken word.
And Nurse came in with the tea things, breast high mid the stands and chairs. But Nurse was alone with her own little soul, and the things were alone with theirs.
She bolted the big round window. She let the blinds unroll. She set a match to the mantel. She covered the fire with coal.
And tea, she said in a tiny voice. Wake up, it's nearly 5. Oh, chintzy, chintzy chariness, half dead and half alive.
Do you know that the stucco is peeling? Do you know that the heart will stop? From those yellow Italianate arches, do you hear the plaster drop?
Nurse looked at the silent bedstead, at the grey, decaying face, as the calm of a Leamington evening drifted into the place. She moved the table of bottles away from the bed to the wall, and tiptoeing gently over the stairs, turned down the gas in the hall.
That's beautiful. You enjoyed that, did you?
That's a lovely plan.
Kiss
Thank
you.
you.
Well, I've so much enjoyed the programme, I really have, including our little spat, Kenneth. It's been smashing. Just before we go, I must remind you that next Saturday we have a special edition of the programme when I'm talking to one of the great figures in music in this century, Duke Ellington. For the moment, Kenneth Williams, Maggie Smith, Sir John Betjeman, thank you very much indeed. See you next week. Goodbye.